500,000 people stood in a field in upstate New York watching a man like he's delivering scripture. 3 days of mud, helicopters in the sky, and a generation waiting for something to believe in. And when he stood up to the mic, they didn't see that it was just a gas fitter from here in Sheffield on Tasker Road. What they did see was a man tearing a song apart like he owed him money. But the strange thing is, this wasn't the start. Because before Woodstock, it was just a bloke that would clock off work at tea time. But even stranger than that was that whilst 500,000 Americans were about to learn his name, 2 boys from Sheffield already knew it. One would go on to front the band Pulp, and the other one would write songs about Sheffield that would echo around the world. This isn't just a story of Joe Cocker, this is a story of how a city quietly raised a legend. So this is where Joe grew up. We're on Tasker Road in Crooks.
Sheffield.
And he grew up at number 38, which is just up here. And it looks just like a lot of places around here in Sheffield.
Just normal.
It's just working class, no nonsense. His father was Harold, and his mum was Madge. He was a civil servant, and she kept house. And somebody called him Joe. And that wasn't his real name.
Is that not his name?
No, he was called John, really. But they used to play a bit of a game. And it was like his character was Cowboy Joe in that. And that's one documented reason for it. And the other one was that it could have been the name of the window cleaner around here. That's true. Music at first is something that exists nearby. He didn't have a guitar, and he was quoted actually about that, because his dad didn't want the guitar to ring out at the backs. But while he is growing up down here, he's listening to people like Ray Charles, Skiffle Records, Lonnie Donegan.
Lay down, boys, take a little nap. 19 miles from the Cumberland Gap. Lay down, boys, take a little nap. 19 miles from the Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. 19 miles from the Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. 19 miles from the Cumberland Gap.
Joe's got an older brother who's called Victor. And at a pub like this in Sheffield, probably not Wetherspoons because they didn't exist, but he gets him up with a skiffle band and Joe sings and everybody claps. And that's it really, nothing happens after that. It's just a thing that happened.
Yeah, he has to go at it.
He had to go at it. This, Claire, is Canada House.
Yeah.
It used to be Sheffield United Gas Light Company or East Midland Gas Board offices. And it looks like at some point it's been a music making place, which is really full circle. But back in the day, this is where Joe used to come to work as a gas fitter. This was the head office. Part of it's a Chinese restaurant now, but he were an apprentice, so he'd do that in daytime, but then he'd go out playing pubs and youth clubs at night, and he formed a band called the Cavaliers.
Oh, they sound brilliant.
And that were around 1960 with 3 mates, and they play skiffle, which I think, as we've been doing research into this, you quite like skiffle, don't you?
I'm a skiffle fan, and I didn't know it.
They're nearly rock and R&B.
Yeah.
But their first gig's at a youth club. And they even have to pay admission to get in to do their own gig. Apparently, yeah. Pints have arrived. Look at that for an head. I'm on Budweiser tonight, by the way.
I've got Bud Light.
Have you?
Oh, have I got yours? Have you got mine?
They went all the way around. The food has arrived, and this is what you get in Wetherspoons. What you going for?
I've got a chicken burger.
So the Cavaliers, they break up after a year.
Oh, no, right.
But then he reinvents himself, this Joe. So he's been watching stuff, as you would do in the 60s, and he reinvents himself as something called Vance Arnold.
Vance Arnold?
Yeah, and I think this is really funny how he got the name. because so the Arnold bit, it came from Eddie Arnold, and Eddie Arnold were a country singer.
Right.
So that's easy, you know, you can kind of see where that came from. But the Vance bit, well, that came from Vince Everett. Have you heard of Vince Everett?
No, I don't know him.
Vince Everett was Elvis's character in Jailhouse Rock. So how did Joe call himself Vance instead of Vince? Well, that's because of an American accent. Because when Elvis was saying it, he was calling himself Vance. And Joe just thought, oh, it's Vance.
He misheard it then,
He misheard it. Really, it should be Vince Arnold. But anyway,
Right.
so there we go. That's why he called himself Vance Arnold.
brilliant.
So he was like this mixture between the two. And his band were called the Avengers.
Great name.
So Vance Arnold and the Avengers. Yeah. So in those days, it weren't a big money-making thing playing around these parts.
Okay.
Sometimes you might get some money, and other times you get paid in beer, and other times, I suppose, you just got paid to
Do it
rehearse.
for the love of it.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if you play in these parts, which I have done, sometimes nobody turns up. I'd imagine more people turn up for Joe Cocker than they did for me, but it's true, you know, sometimes you wouldn't have anybody in, so you can either take your gear down and go home, or just have a bit of a rehearsal space, and that's what happened to Joe. If you got beer, it were always better. Unless it were Bud Light.
Yeah, my baby left me and never said a word. Was it something out of something that you heard? My baby left me. My baby left me. My baby even left me and never said a word. Lord, I stand.
Oh, Claire, this is really sad.
Yeah.
Because we planned this video out, and I haven't been down here for years. I actually played in here once, but this was the Leadmill. It's like an institution. I know a lot of people have tried to save it, but I'm really sad because I didn't realise that it had actually fully finished, but it's gone, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely terribly sad.
What an absolute shame that they couldn't save it. Anyway, let me tell you about what used to happen here. The ground floor, that was the Leadmill, but above it used to be the Esquire Club. And the Esquire Club were basically the place where a lot of people went, but it was full of men with trades, and some of them had got guitars, and not all of them could play that well. But that didn't really matter. Everybody got up and had a go. I'm sure they got, what do they call it around here, got paid off if it weren't that good. This were it. They weren't trying to make it big.
Yeah.
They were just playing. They weren't trying to be discovered or anything. It was like, well, we're just entertaining people.
Enjoyed it, didn't they?
In the daytime, Joe's working with a guy called Dave, and they fit radiators together and boilers and all that type of stuff. But at night time, they come here, and Joe's band, they have a residency here. At some point, they had a residency. And also, Dave's band had a residency.
Okay.
And sometimes Dave's brother-in-law, Frank, would get up and play too.
Oh.
Now, the interesting thing is that Joe would sometimes come here straight after work, so he'd be in his donkey jacket and he'd have mucky hands and everything else.
Yeah.
Have a few pints and get up and grab hold of the microphone and do his singing. And this were all done in places like this, and I just can't believe that this has gone. This is Sheffield's Cavern Club.
This is, yes,
And,
it is.
you know, we went to Cavern Club, and look at the difference that was. It's such a shame.
Shut down.
I think it's, I don't know what's planned. We're going to have a look inside. I hope there's something planned. I hope somebody steps in just to save it, because I really feel sad about it.
It's iconic, yes.
Yeah.
We've both been in here, haven't we?
On different nights.
On different nights.
I came for rock and indie night, and I think they used to call it Boy Racer night.
Was that what you used to
They were
come
called,
for?
I played the
Right.
Boy Racer night. You had to sell tickets, which were quite difficult when you only had 3 friends in school. And that school weren't in Sheffield.
My mother told me before she passed away, said, son, when I'm gone, don't forget to pray, 'cause there'll be hard times. Hard times, oh yeah, yeah. Who knows better than
So in 1963, Joe got a proper gig here at the City Hall in Sheffield with the Rolling Stones.
How the hell did he manage that?
Well, what used to happen is when a big act came to town, the promoters would have a look round and see who were hot in the area. So Vance, Arnold and the Avengers were the hottest ticket for like Ray Charles and Chuck Berry type of stuff. So that kind of fit in with what Rolling Stones were doing.
Yeah.
Because you've got to think in 1962, 1963, they were all over the place doing loads and loads of pub gigs. So everybody knew them round here. I suppose it's a way where you can get a good local crowd to come and see your out of town band. That's how it used to work.
Yeah.
You know, so you got the big draw, kind of work both ways, didn't it? You got the big draw of like Rolling Stones, but then if you don't know Rolling Stones, you're probably going to come to see Vance and see what's something I love that I can't help thinking about it. It's called Vance. So apparently it were billed as Rolling Stones / Vance Arnold and the Avengers. And that's how it will build. This building behind us, City Hall in Sheffield, has seen so many gigs, and I'm sure it's not the only time that we're going to be coming back here, because pretty much everybody and anybody's been here. And now we're here. I don't know who's on tonight, Claire, but from the crowd, I don't think it's a contemporary band. I think we'd look all right in there. So basically, Joe does the gig, but then he goes back to his normal life, pubs, clubs. Rolling Stones move on to conquer the world as they did.
Yes, yeah.
Keith Richards, as the old saying says, what are we all going to do when there's only Keith left? Because he seems to outlive everybody. But following year, Joe gets a bit of a break.
Really?
Yeah, and he gets signed to Decca Records.
Ooh.
So how that came about is there's a guy called Mike Leander. Have you heard of Mike Leander?
No, I haven't.
So Mike Leander is already an established arranger and producer. And he spotted that Joe had got this really bluesy vocal style with Vance and the Avengers.
Yeah.
So he was so impressed that he arranged a demo session for him. And Decca picked up on that tape and they signed him up as a solo act. And then they issued him with his debut single, which were a song by the Beatles, I'll Cry Instead. Have you heard of that?
No, I've not heard of
I'll
that
Cry
song.
Instead. No, you'll take Yesterday instead, probably, won't you? But they had some big session players on there. One of them were a guy called Big Jim Sullivan, and he was a guitarist.
Yeah.
And then there were another guitarist, but we'll get to him a bit later on. He releases this single, but then guess what?
Oh, what?
Well, he goes pretty much like these taxis are going, nowhere, and he gets dropped. And then on Monday, he's back at work. Not at the Oriental Buffet, it's for the gas board.
Well, we were born within an hour of each other. Our mother said we could be sister and brother. Your name was Deborah. It never suited you.
We've come to a place called Couch, which is near Banker's Draft or somewhere in the middle of Sheffield, and we're going to have some breakfast.
Let's all meet up in the year 2000. Won't it be strange when we're all fully grown? Be there 2 o'clock by the fountain down the road. Well, I never knew that you'd get married, and I would be living down here on my own. On that damp and lonely Thursday years ago.
Now, when we think of rock stars, we don't usually think of them as babysitters, but that's actually true in this case.
babysitter?
A babysitter. Can you believe it? Thank you. Trying to navigate the streets of Sheffield with a camera in your hand and it raining and cars coming at you. Yeah, so you're a babysitter.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you all about it as we make our way through the town, not the town, the city of Sheffield. So there's a family that Joe knows, and rumour has it that he fitted a gas fire for him. But basically, they share the same name, Cocker, but they're not related.
Okay.
Some people said that they were. But
they're not.
They're not related. They just knew each other. So every now and again, the family needs somebody just to watch over the kids. So it's probably not like a babysitter as in paid babysitter type of sense. But he just watch over him. Anyway, he grows up and he's tall, a bit awkward, he don't fit in. It's Jarvis Cocker.
I know him, yes.
From Pulp.
Yeah, brilliant.
So this is probably more your style.
Yeah.
What's your favourite Pulp song?
Common People?
Right, well, he was brought up in Intake, which is another area of Sheffield, but we've not gone to Intake because we don't know exactly where it is, so we could be on wrong street.
I wish I'd gone to intake now, so it might not be raining there. And Jarvis weren't an overnight success. He didn't fit in, as I said. His songs didn't even fit in, but then after a while, you got where it started to make sense to people.
Right.
And basically, a generation of people around here just had these lyrics telling them about themselves, and they could relate to it.
Yeah.
Jarvis got to be a massive success. So that's the story of Jarvis and Joe, and
Yeah.
how all that came about. But they're not related, remember?
Hold back the night from us. Cherish the light for us. Don't let the shadows hold back the dawn. Cold city lights glowing. The traffic of life is flowing out over the rivers and on into dark. I'm going downtown where there's music. I'm going where voices fill the air. Maybe there's someone waiting for me with a smile and a flower in her hair.
Right then, Claire, so Joe's got a role that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. But can you remember Joe's mate from work, Dave?
Dave, yep.
Yeah, well, that's Dave Hawley. And remember that Dave's a guitarist?
Yes.
And he works on the same music circuit as Joe and Dave's brother-in-law, Frank.
Yes.
Well, he's called Frank White.
Right, okay.
And if you're from these parts and you like your music, like club music, working men's club music, everybody knew Frank White.
Yeah.
Because he was the god.
He was the turn.
He was the guy. He was a monster guitarist. And he actually did a stint with Dave Berry and the Cruisers. Can you remember them?
I do know them, yes.
Can you remember what they sang?
Crying?
Crying Game.
Crying Game.
Now, local legend has it that Frank White was Eric Clapton's favourite guitarist.
That's amazing, actually.
And everybody around here that plays club circuits, they know that. But I can't find it written down anywhere, but I reckon we'll just go with it.
Yeah.
That's the local legend. Frank White was Eric Clapton's favourite guitarist. Anyway, Claire, we digress. So Dave Hawley and Lynn Hawley asked Joe to be their son's godfather. Now, do you know who their child was?
No, tell
You
me.
do know him because you actually love this artist,
Is it Richard?
Richard Hawley. So he was a guitarist now. I actually kind of crossed paths with Richard once because
way.
we were on the same bill, just like Joe Cocker were on the same bill with the Rolling Stones.
Right.
I were on the same bill with Richard Hawley.
No way, I didn't know this.
Do you know where Don Valley Bowl is?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they had this gig. I think I were on about 11 a.m. and Richard got up about 9 p.m. So, but we're going to take that, aren't we?
That's good.
Do you know what though? He's had 2 Mercury Prize nominations, an Olivia Award because he did a musical, Standing on the Sky's Edge, and that was about Park Hill Flats.
That's right.
And he's played with like Arctic Monkeys, Manic Street Preachers.
Some really big bands then.
Yeah, he even had a song, or some songs, on Peaky Blinders. I only got halfway through it.
Oh, Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, I only got halfway through it because I get bored really quick and stuff. So, but it was good. I enjoyed the first bit. Now, this where we are is Cole's Corner, and I'm sure it were a bit more romantic before Burger King took over, but they do like to have it their way, don't they? But yeah, so you might notice that it kind of looks like the front cover of Richard Hawley's album Cole's Corner,
Yes.
but a little bit different, and that's because that was taken outside a place in Scarborough.
Yeah. A theatre, I think.
It's a theatre, it's Stephen Joseph Theatre, And yeah, that's why it looks a bit different. But it's got the same vibe, I think.
Yeah.
Now, you might also notice that we're playing Cole's Corner in the background to this, but it's not Richard singing it. This is mate Tony Christie. It's such a beautiful version.
Gorgeous.
And now we're in the train station, and we're in the train station because Joe gets another offer. And this in 1966. Basically, it teams up with this guy who's a multi-instrumentalist. Is called Chris Stainton, and they form a band called the Grease Band, which I think is a right interesting name, Grease Band. But they got the name because they saw this organ player in an interview. He said that a band had got some grease, and it means it's like cool. I think this is when everybody called each other cats.
Crazy cats.
So they do this demo, and it catches the ear of a guy called Denny Cordell, and he manages Procol Harlem. I really struggle to say Procol Harlem, so I said Procol Harem. But
Okay,
have you heard of them?
Yeah, no.
Whiter Shade of Pale.
Oh, of course.
And they release a song called, I think it's called Margarine. I'll put it up on screen, because I think that's how you pronounce it. But
Yeah.
it seems like a funny thing to sing about, a bit of margarine. Don't you think?
Yeah. Strange song.
I'd imagine back in the 60s it was the future, weren't it? Anyway, Hawley makes a minor splash. Nothing really happens with it. But then Joe's got an idea that he wants to do a song that Ringo Starr sung on a Beatles album.
Yeah.
Can you remember A Little Help With My Friends?
Yes, definitely.
Well, the Beatles version is quite cheeky, chappy, Ringo singing and doing his thing. But Joe wanted to turn it into like this waltz where it made him sound like you were begging. So they booked the Olympic Studios and Trident Studios in London,
Right.
which is why we're here. I don't know if they went on train, but it just seems like a good background, to be fair. So because of this guy's connections, they got BJ Wilson with a drummer of Procol Harlem, and some other session players. But then there were a guy on guitar. Now, you might not know this guy, but I'm sure people that are watching will know him. It's called Jimmy Page. Do you know Jimmy Page?
I think I might know Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page were a prolific session player in these days, and he'd play on a load of James Bond soundtracks. And he played with major artists, but that's what he was doing. He works with the Kinks, Marianne Faithfull, Donovan, and there's loads of tracks and loads of soundtracks where Jimmy Page has actually played on that he's not actually credited on.
Really?
So his work is bigger than ever. But interestingly enough, as a session player, it's usually a requirement that you can read music because they give you stuff. Jimmy Page, he can't read music. He just used to learn his part and then go in, but he was that good.
He could just do it.
That he got away with it.
He was winging it.
Now, legend had it that Beatles actually heard Joe Cocker's version of A Little Help From My Friends, and they loved it.
Yeah.
And I think they used to offer him a choice of whatever he wanted to cover. It's like Joe were kind of like, he were a cover artist a lot of the time. He didn't write his own stuff.
Wow, that
So
was pretty impressive.
he was like the guy that covers stuff. Jimmy does his job properly, as Jimmy always does. So Joe says, hey, do you want to join the Grease Band?
He asked Jimmy Page?
He asked Jimmy Page. You know what Jimmy said to him? He says, you know, Joe, I've got something a little heavier to do.
Helplessly hoping her helicopter hovers nearby, lost in the smog.
In August 1969, a man steps off a helicopter onto a stage in upstate New York. 500,000 people are waiting, and they don't know Crooks, and they don't know 38 Tasker Road, they don't know the East Midlands Gas Board, and they don't know the pubs where no one stopped talking. They only knew the sound. And in that moment, he stops being local and he becomes history. After the years of standing at the side in a donkey jacket, after the nights singing to people who didn't listen, after being the babysitter, after being the godfather, and after clocking in and out of work, because legends don't arrive fully formed in helicopters, they're built slowly, in terrace houses, in working men's clubs, and in cities that don't think they're raising anything special. So Claire, the gas fitter from 38 Tasker Road didn't escape Sheffield, he carried it with him. and 500,000 people felt it as soon as they heard.